we try really hard to make sure that we're giving them this life that we really wanted them to have.
Like, and a lot of parents say this too. It's like, we want them to have a better life or upbringing than we had.
But again, it comes back to, are we doing too much?
What you're actually doing is kind of limiting the exposure of your kids, because the parts that I don't like actually made me a lot stronger. So we're going to be talking about giving your kids a better lifestyle than you had, but what does that entail?
Mm-hmm. All right. What does that really mean?
What does that mean? What
because
does it
we've
mean?
heard it from so many people all our lives, like growing up. Even our parents would say, I'm going to give you a better lifestyle than what I had, you know, and make sure you have more than what I had.
Yeah.
So what does that really mean to you?
So I think we can start. All right. So let's start from scratch. I'll explain a little bit about my upbringing, right? So both of us, we're from Queens, New York.
Long Island first.
Long Island first. So, you know, my upbringing and my kids were a lot different because, again, you know, we did have a house. Thank God we did have a house. My grandmother struggled a lot to get the house that we were in and I was raised in until, you know, I went away to college, but it was a little bit different. It was a little rougher where we grew up. You know, we were in South Jamaica, Queens. So, you know, one block over, they're hustling. 1 block over this way, you know, somebody possibly got shot, somebody's murdered. But then if you go 2 blocks over this way, it's a nicer, people are riding bikes outside. I mean, even though we did that, but it was just a nice area, nice neighborhood. We walked everywhere. I only took the bus when I went to junior high school, and then I walked to my high school. So it was like we were all in this community. Pretty much everybody knew each other. So if somebody came in that was not from the community, you could tell automatically. There was a lot of social hierarchy, I could say. Maybe it was you understood who to mess with and who not to mess with. If you were liked by the people, you know, as far as like not to mess with, then you were pretty much like kind of like a made kid. It's like they're not going to touch you. They know your brother, whatever the case may be. So it was a lot different. It was definitely a lot different than what they have now. But I would say that the big difference between growing up in New York versus growing up here in the suburbs where we're at was just the different things that we experience, meaning the different situations that we experience. Because from an early age, I've seen things that my 11-year-old, he has no clue what it is. And I'm not saying that, you know, because he's oblivious or he's, oh my God, get this kid some street smarts. It's not that. But it's just where they're at. There's nowhere for him to be in those situations. Thank God. Thank God. This is not in any way, shape, form, or fashion trying to brag. This is not a way of saying I'm better, bashing. This is not any of that. It's just saying based off us wanting to give our kids a better life. Like, what about you? Like, how did you grow up?
So I grew up in Long Island first. And so Long Island to me the area I grew up in was kind of similar to this, where we live at now, like the suburbs, big houses, lots of land to ride our bikes. So every day we're going outside, riding our bikes. We are just having a good time. It was kind of similar to where I am now. And I want to say then I moved to Queens when I was maybe like 10 years old, 10, 11. And it was a big culture shock for me because it was so different from when I grew up in Long Island. The houses were a lot closer together. There wasn't a lot of grass to, you know, play in. Their neighbors, you know, it was a little bit more rougher, and it was just like, ooh, this is different. I remember I got in my first fight at school, which in Long Island, I never got in a fight, but, you know, I came in and, oh, you light skin, you think you this, you that, and I got in a fight, and it's just like, oh my gosh. So it was a big shock and adjustment for me, and then taking the bus and the train, which I never had to take in Long Island. We drove everywhere. Even though we had a car in Queens, it was just easier for us to get on the bus and train, especially going to school. And so it was a lot different, and even going to the church we went to, Bethel, it was just like, okay, now you're in a church. And in Long Island, people looked at you like you, but not a lot of people look like you. And to be thrown into a place now where everyone looks like you, and you're like, oh, okay, this is just normal now. I do remember my parents sending me to Martin Luther High School in Maspeth. And they sent me there because they wanted me to have a better view on the world. Because everything at that time that I was around when we moved to Queens was just around Black people. and just around African Americans. So it wasn't in Spanish and this and that, but it wasn't around like a bunch of, Caucasian people or anything like that. So it was like, you know what, we want you to have a different view on the world, because when you go to work, not everyone's going to look like you.
Yeah.
When you go into different churches or this or that, not everyone's going to look like you. So you need to know how to interact with other people. So that's how I got to that school. And then we decided, when we were in college, we were like, the both of us decided we wanted to go away.
Yeah.
We wanted to go away to college. We wanted to, that was our first part of traveling. We wanted to experience life outside of New York. What is it like?
Yeah.
And so we picked Valdosta State University, which
Big
was
change.
the middle of the boondies. Like, what in the world? Everybody laughs at us and it's like, how'd you get to Valdosta? How did we get to Valdosta, Jason?
Internet. That was on the internet. I Googled my major. I Googled her major.
No. When you and Corbett went to go visit.
Well, that was after.
You went to go visit, and I said, "Hey, babe, do you mind like looking at going around Valdosta and see what it's like?"
Yeah, we
they went to the college campus, walked in a couple of buildings, like, "Oh, it's nice," and then drove back. And so when I got there, I'm just like,
we didn't even walk into a building.
Look, see,
we rode the yard. That was, come on now. We rode the yard. This is back when Stomp the Yard? What is that?
No,
movie?
that was way after.
It was way after?
Yeah.
Are you sure? Drumline?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Well, a different world. They were on the yard. So I was like, no, let's drive the yard to see what it's like. We saw people out there. So, it had a big mixture of, Caucasians and African Americans. I saw some Spanish people there. I was like, oh, this is it. The buildings look nice and look clean. Let's go. So we literally
and then
drove
drove
back
their
to
little
Daytona.
happy self back to Daytona.
Yeah.
So I'm calling on my little Nextel. What was it like? And he's like, "Oh, it's beautiful."
Yeah, it was beautiful. It is beautiful. It's a beautiful school.
If y'all have been to Valdosta, love Valdosta, but there is nothing else to do. Now there is. It's grown a lot more than when we were there. Yeah. But for fun, we would go to Walmart. Club Walmart was our fun. So, that was it. So I want to say that once we got to Valdosta and we saw the lifestyle there, we were like, wow, this, even though it was slow and it took us some time to get used to, we could never see ourselves going back to New York.
No.
We were just like, we can't do it. We can't. We don't want to, If we didn't want to go back to New York, even, when our family was like, hey, we're moving to another house. You guys want to move in this house? And we were like, no thanks, And that was crazy because people were like, wait, what? And I'm just like, yeah, but we just couldn't see. We knew eventually we wanted to have kids. And we just knew we didn't want them to have that lifestyle that we grew up in as far as the hustle and bustle and the fast pace of life. Now, it is good for them to have a little bit of that in them because you don't want them to be like slow as all get out. But we didn't want that to have those experiences. We wanted them to go out in the backyard. We wanted them to be able to ride down the street and, just be comfortable. Now, there are parts of New York that you could go and live there, but it's so expensive. And we were just like coming out of college and like, we can get that here for a fraction of the price, or we can go there and have to go to Long Island and Hempstead area. Pay crazy
so
amounts
much in taxes.
And my grandmother always talks about her taxes. So I'm just like, oh, that's not what we want to do.
So I think the thing is what really cemented it for us is like every time that you went home during the summer breaks or spring break, if we did go home, but summer breaks was like the first few times we went home, it's like, oh man, I miss it. And you want to get all the things that you were used to, like the nostalgic things. You want to get your pizza and this and that. But then when you go for like 2 days and you look around and like, not knocking New York. I mean, I love the state, I love the city, but it's like when you realize that you could live just a little bit, as far as like things being a little bit cleaner and things not thrown everywhere. And again, I know it's just the city, it's the population. That's just the way it is. It's you about move. But when you were here and you came back, you were like, I kind of miss, being a little bit slower paced because it's just the comfort. You could actually sit down on a porch or you could sit down at a park and really just hang out and really, just really chill, so that's what really cemented it, especially as we got closer and closer to graduate. We were like, okay, we need to make plans like to really cement things here in Georgia because it wasn't going to be Valdosta. We said we needed something just a little bit faster.
No.
Just a hair. And this is where I end up moving to Atlanta. So
Fast forward, we have kids.
Yeah, we have kids now, yeah.
And we just started to realize, and talking with a lot of friends too, that they're having the same issue that we're having. And it's that our kids don't realize that other people around them go through so much.
Yeah.
They live in this little bubble sometimes, and it's no fault to them. It's really what we've wanted to protect them from. We wanted to only expose them to certain things, only put them in good environments. And I know a lot of people who do that. We, want to make sure that they're in a great school. We want to make sure, so they went to private school, and then after private school, because Chase graduated, like his school was so small. He graduated with 3. It was 3 of them who graduated. 3. And we were just like, we can't just throw him out there to any school. So we found this classical school. And within finding the classical school, it's great and we love it. But we realized everybody is so similar to him as far as their upbringing.
Yeah.
They all live in nice neighborhoods. They have cars that they drive to school in. They travel a lot. And not that those things are bad. Those are really great things. And we always push for kids to travel and see the world. And this is part of why we push for that too. But within doing that, going to the church we go to, going to the schools we go to, the neighbors we have, they don't really understand when we always tell them, you don't realize how good you have it.
Yeah.
You don't understand that you have it better than a lot of kids. And we try to explain that to them, but sometimes I don't think it sticks, because they've never experienced that. And it's partly because we've tried to protect them from those things, And
then by protecting them from those things, meaning like we work so hard as parents to give them, we always say it, like, and a lot of parents say this too, it's like we want them to have a better life or upbringing than we had. Whereas if you really look at it, you're just doing the best that you could possibly do with what you have. And same thing for our parents. My grandmother, all the same things. She was doing the best of what she had with the kids that she had. It was 4 of us. So we always look at it now, because hindsight is 2020. You can look back at all the things that you did and now say, okay, I didn't like this. I didn't like this. It's kind of like you could pick and choose. Like it's like a buffet. Like, I love this part. I didn't like this part. I'm going to eliminate that part. But in doing so, what you're actually doing is kind of limiting the exposure of your kids, because the parts that I don't like actually made me a lot stronger. I didn't really particularly care for the fact that there was things going on up the street, but I knew how to handle myself if I got around that. Now, if you completely remove that from like our kids' lives now, they're just walking into it completely like, la, 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 la. Oh, what's that? Because they have no idea. And, some people say, like, I think I mentioned it earlier, said this kid needs to learn some street smarts. But if you're not in the street, how can you learn
street smarts?
You can see it on TV, but it's different.
Different.
It's kind of like you looking at, like, gangster rap videos, and all of a sudden you're a gangster and be like, you have no street cred. What are you trying to do? You don't have any of that. So I think that's one thing that we started noticing now with this whole bubble that you're talking about, because a lot of the kids don't. The parents may have it, but a lot of the kids don't. But to whose fault is that? Is it your fault or us as parents because we want them to have a better life that we had? But by doing that, you're taking away possibly all the things that make them resilient. And when they get into the real world, that's when they're hiding against stuff, or they can't speak, or they can't express themselves, or they're afraid of certain things because they haven't experienced it at a young age to learn how to overcome it.
Yeah, I will say it's always funny for us to look at when the boys go to New York, we visit.
Oh, yeah.
And they really don't care for New York. Like, they're just like, oh, we want to go back home,
Yeah, it's
even though their grandparents have a really nice house and everything is nice there, but when they have to step out into the street or they have to go to Manhattan, we have to take the trains. It's a lot different. But we take them because we're like, you need to see what it's like to be in New York. You need to see what the hustle and bustle. We always have to remind Chase, stop smiling at everybody. You can't wave and smile. It's not Georgia. You don't do that,
It's a big
so
difference,
it's a learning lesson for him. So when he knows that, okay, not everyone's going to smile back like they do in Georgia. Not saying it's a bad thing. Well, we know this, not everyone's going to be so welcoming, but you have to understand they're not being mean. They just don't have time for that. Or we grew up knowing you have to you can be taken advantage of if you're so nice.
Yeah.
So we try to teach him that for that reason. And it's hard because like Jason said, how do you put them in those situations where they can see that it's different for other people than it is for them?
Yeah.
I think one good thing that happened this weekend was we had the opportunity to, Jason had, when I tell you, we just had this conversation with Chase about, you make sure you give us hugs, make sure you tell us we love each other, because you never know when it could be someone's last day. Mm-hmm. And you were sharing the story about how your mom passed away at a young age.
Yeah, it was 9. Mm-hmm.
At 9, and he understood it, but because we've never, thank God, have gone through a death in our family
that this close,
like our immediate family, this close, like aunts or uncles or anything like that, grandparents. They've never experienced what it's like to lose someone. Mm-hmm. They never experienced that. So because they've never experienced that, talking to them, it's kind of hard because they don't see it, they don't see it every day. So we had the opportunity to go to what's called Thumbs Up. Mm-hmm. Thumbs Up Ministries. And it's just a really cool Christian organization that does so much. And I won't talk a lot about it, but they just do a lot for families who have cancer. Mm-hmm. And we got to be a host family. And with the host family at Great Wolf Lodge, now we've gone there several times, had a great time, but this time it was different. Mm-hmm. And to see our kids in that environment and to see how they shined when they knew this weekend is not about me, it's about helping someone else. But then they got to hear the stories from people to say, wow, I've had cancer and a friend of mine passed away, or my mom passed away, or, I'm battling this right now. You can see it change them. Mm-hmm. It really, what then Jason said about losing my mom at a young age, to see it from peers that are around their age or people who are going through this right now.
It was different.
It hit home, and I was like, okay, so we need to make sure that we're exposing them to more things to get them out of this bubble. Mm-hmm. So now Chase is just, and both Carter, and I really want to say I was so proud of them to just see them put themselves aside and know that this wasn't about us. And we didn't even have to tell them that. Mm-mm. They just went straight in and they were like, how can we help? How can we do this? How can we, no, what do you want to do this weekend? And that was really good. Yeah. But again, we had to pull them out of that bubble, not saying that they went right back into the bubble, but we had to pull them out to see like, hey, this is what's going on.
Yeah. And I think a lot of what people will probably look at this and say, well, that's privilege. Like, oh, he's so privileged. They're privileged kids. But there's a lot of talk about privilege in this country. And we're not even going to go there. We're not going into that at all. But the privilege aspect, what I'm referring to is that a lot of times the kids, they don't even know that they're privileged because, again, what we mentioned earlier, if everybody that you associate with yourself with at schools, at your soccer games, at your ninja courses, whatever you're doing, they're all kind of on the same level and they're not complaining about certain things, like as far as
I didn't get to eat last night. Or you're realizing that, this person, I think that's the same shirt they wore 4 days in a row. If they're not going through that just based off the environment that you're in, not saying that we're looking at that in a way of, just saying like, oh, just look at that person over there. It's unfortunate for them. Not saying that. It's just based off where they're at. There's a level of everyone that just saying, hey, kids have clean clothes. They ate breakfast. They're going to school. They're all trying to learn. It's all about getting an A or B. You kind of see what I'm saying? Like, we're just leveling the playing field. But where they don't even realize the privilege is there. Yeah, they just think this is their normal life.
This is norm.
This is normal life to say that, hey, spring break is coming up. Where are we going for spring break?
Whereas, for most, it may not even be spring break is coming up. It's like,
yeah, and the school that I used to work at, it was the same way. I had to learn, I had to swallow a tough pill, was that the kids, I had to realize I couldn't ask them, how was their summer break? Now, when I worked in another school, another part of town, that was like normal. The kids went on spring break all the time. They went on summer break. They went here, they went there. But then when I moved to this school, it was a lot different. Yeah. And I had to say, oh my gosh, they want to be at school, not because they want to learn, but because this might be a meal that they're getting. This might be a safe environment for them, where my kids are like, okay, where are we going in the summertime? Where are we going here? Where are we going there? Because the kids around them that they know and their friends are all traveling. Yeah. And they're all going to places. So I'll sometimes tell my kids like, hey, we don't have to go somewhere all the time. We can, spend some family time here. We can do this and that. And we do. We try to say, you know what? We need to cut back a little bit because we don't want them to think that every break you got to do something. Even though we love traveling, we try to say, okay, or if we do go travel, how can we figure out a way to help somebody here. You know, sometimes I used to pack a bag with all their stuff in it, from clothes that they couldn't wear. And I'm like, hey, we're going to give this to these people, you know, because we want to bless somebody while we're here.
Yeah.
You know, so you can see that you're coming here, but you're not coming here to showboat. You're coming here because it's a privilege to come here, and that not everyone has that privilege.
Yeah. I think another thing that we do that's good to kind of level that whole privilege feeling, or that bubble feeling, is like you said, when we do go places, but instead, outside of us bringing stuff, is really breaking down what this person may be going through. Because you ask a ton of questions if we travel anywhere. Brissette asks a ton of questions. And, you know, in our episode, we were just talking about that, about what is life like? Where are your kids going to school? How many kids do you have? You know, not prying, not being nosy, but just really trying to understand, okay, what is life like for you working here? And I hate to say it, but a lot of time we experience that, like in Mexico, and then they would tell us like what they're getting paid. And we then don't hide that from the kids. We let them know, hey, I understand that, you know, this person is here helping us. He's cooking or they're cleaning the room, but do you know how much they make? And especially as they get older, just opening up to more things, not hiding things from them, and let them know like this person only gets paid X, Y, and Z. It's a lot different than us in the US, or it's a lot different than whatever country you guys may be in. But to let them see that perspective and to realize this person is really no different than me. You know, they walk like me, they move like me, they have the same amount of fingers, toes, whatever the case may be as me. But just to let them see that and realize like, you know, we're not that far off, you know, and I think that brings them back down to reality as well. So it's not this whole bubble that they're living in, consistently thinking, why is the Wi-Fi so not strong?
Yeah.
Like I'm sorry?
Yeah. Or how come we're not, you know, doing X, Y, and Z, or whatever. And I will say with that too, after they find out, you know, they really fall in love with a waiter, or they fall in love with someone in the housekeeping, they're like, okay, mama, you need to give them a really good tip.
Yeah.
You need to give them this and that. And I will do that because I want them to see, yes, if a person's doing a great job, they're working hard, and you know their struggle, but let's give them something. Let's, you know, bless them in a way that, you know, it might take, and Carter will be like, no, I want to give some of my money, or that case, because he's like, I understand.
Yeah.
And it's good for them to understand that, because the world, again, that they live in is so different. And not saying that we have it, there's people who have it much better than us.
A lot better.
You know, much better than us.
Yeah.
But we try really hard to make sure that we're giving them this life that we, you know, we really wanted them to have. But again, it comes back to, are we doing too much?
Yeah.
Are we not exposing them to enough? Are we, you know, are we in this quick world? I was talking to a friend yesterday, and she was having the same problem with her daughter, you know, being in this quick world. She lost her Stanley Cup at school, and she was like, I need it now. I need it now. Just order for Amazon. And she was like, no, you have to work for it now.
Yeah.
No, you lost that. I bought you the first one. You're using your own money, and you're going to find a sale on it, and you're going to wait to get it, you know, because you don't appreciate the fact that, yes, you got it, but now you have to pay for it. And it's not going to come like that, you know. And that's another thing too. Everything, this instant, you know, as kids, we didn't just get to, like, we had to wait to go to the store to get a toy. It wasn't like on Amazon, like, oh, just order it.
We used to order stuff. Remember that? Order on a 1-900 number or 1-800 number, and you pay shipping and handling fees. And shipping and handling is like more than the thing costs. Like, this thing is $20, $19.99. But shipping and handling is $50, like $49.99. And you have to wait for it 6 to 8 weeks for delivery.
Yeah.
So like things like that now, it's that instant gratification part that I think that's a large part of the struggle with having kids in a bubble, because they just used to it. Like, I want it now. That's just the age, the society that we're living in. But outside of like things being so instant, it is realizing that, letting them see like the process behind a lot of things. So for instance, you know, we've talked about like, you know, if the housekeeper and such like that, like letting them in on things, but a lot of things that they watch on TV, like let's say YouTube, for instance, they just think that's the way it is. Like we had this big issue with Carter and Ryan's World, where they're only looking at, and again, they're younger, so they wouldn't really understand, or what all goes into things outside of that. So we try to do a really good job on explaining that, because even for us, we've seen the toy commercials during like Transformers or something like that, during the regular commercials when we had to watch them, and like, this kid is having so much fun with this toy. I want this toy. We need this toy. But when you get it, you be like, why are we not having as much fun as he is? Not realizing it was an ad. So one thing we try to do is make sure that we explain like, hey, this is not real. So really,
it's a lot of edits that go into this to make it look perfect.
Make it look perfect. Now, the one thing I would say, as Chase got older, he started realizing that. And Carter, the only time I really think it's hitting hard now, what is really sinking in, is like when we started doing things, but he started looking at like the Dude Perfect, like the app, and all that goes in behind the scene. He's like, oh. And it wasn't until he's 11 till he understands that. But living in this bubble society where if a kid has a phone and they're just scrolling, looking at a 15-second TikTok or 30-second TikTok, they're not understanding like, well, I'm just going to make a lot of money and just be rich. I'm like,
yeah, it takes more than that.
It takes more than that, or why don't we have this big house? This person has this big house. I'm like,
but do you know how long they worked before they got that big house, Mm-hmm. And I will say that too. It's to put things, like to reel it back in, is Carter would go to one of his friends' houses, and maybe their house is 3 times bigger than our house. And then for a long time, he would say, wow, they must be rich. Wow, they must. And then you explain to them, well, maybe they bought their house during the time of the market when it was a lot less, or how long have they had this house? Or maybe they make a lot. Or for us, we would say we could have a bigger house, but we choose to travel than have this huge house. And we realized we got a bigger house from the house we first had when you were born. But then we realized, you know what? We don't even need this size of a house. Like, we can downsize. And we don't even use half of the rooms in the house. Yeah. But we choose not. And then once we explained it to him that way, he was like, oh, that makes sense.
It makes complete sense. Yeah. And the last thing I would say is the resilience part. I touched on it just a little bit earlier, but I think by really just kind of like removing them from that bubble and letting them experience more things. This is one of the reasons why we like letting them travel, to see different things, because you get to see different cultures and what they consider to be the norm. For instance, when we were...
Can I stop you for a second?
Go ahead.
I want to say, traveling to not just a resort, because before we would travel and we would stay at like a Marriott, a Westin, a Sheraton, whatever. And so they didn't really see that. But once you travel to other countries and you're staying in different locations, then you're in the heart of it. And then you get to see like, ooh, okay, this is what life is really like.
This is like what's really like. It's not all about just entering in, somebody opening the door.
Some grand,
beautiful and marble floors, and then you're going upstairs to your room where everything is made. Like, no. This is how it really is. But letting them see what norms are in different countries, or norms are in different parts of the U.S., actually, because there's different norms that would be, for instance, in Kansas or in South Dakota than what is a norm here in Atlanta, So I think by letting them see that, it kind of evens it out so where they're not living in this bubble. But it also teaches them how to react to certain things, to react to certain people. Because I think a lot of what happens when people say, again, this privilege part, is this, the fact of the matter is that person, that child, that adult, or whoever it is, they just haven't experienced it. They haven't hit that scenario yet. So like, kind of like life
even when that example, sorry to cut you off, that example that you give Chase every time when you guys went to that camp, it wasn't that the kid was a bad kid. He just never been around anybody who.
So yes, that was perfect as far as what you're saying, because there was an instance where Chase and I, we went to a camp. Not saying a camp, but we went to a camp, and we were in a room. It was about, maybe like 15, maybe 20 of us inside the room. It was counselors and also kids around Chase's age. Maybe I would say maybe for like 12 to like 14, to say that age. And it was a kid that was making racial remarks. He didn't realize it was racial remarks just based off the fact that where he came from, and I'm not going to say the state or anything like that, where he came from, there weren't a lot of us. And maybe just from what he saw on TV, I don't know. I couldn't tell you, but it was just something that I had to stop. But it wasn't until he said it to where most of the counselors, including myself, say, hey, that's inappropriate. And he generally didn't understand that it was inappropriate. He was just saying something that He's heard before, clearly. But it was just, that's what it was. And we can't look at him and say, oh my God, you like, what's wrong with you?
But
But
also, he never realized the impact it would have on somebody by saying it to
by
them,
saying to their face
to
or
their
saying it when
face
they're in the room.
while they're
Yeah.
in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Because in his world, everyone looks like him.
They all look
Everybody
like
at
this,
school
back
looks
in
like
that
him.
bubble. Exactly.
Everybody,
Yeah.
he interacts, looks like him. So it's like, what do you mean this is wrong? What do you
Yes,
mean
yeah.
I shouldn't say this in front of someone? And he became like one of your
Yeah,
best friends
best
after.
buddies. Like, I saw him the next year we went back, and even though, I'm sorry, during that trip, like 2 days later, pulled me to the side. I was like, hey, I'm really sorry about what I said. And he was a sweet kid. He was, I'm really sorry about what I said. I didn't realize it was hurting you. And it wasn't until I guess he was probably apprehensive to say, he's like, oh my God, like, what is this guy gonna do to me? He's older than me. But I was like, no. I was like, thank you so much. And I acknowledged him and said, yeah, it does hurt people who look like me. And the next time I saw him was my best friend. It was insane. It was my best friend. But that goes back into being in a bubble, saying, you're gonna have a better life than I had. We're gonna do all this for you. Or even if that you're not going to have a better life than I am, you just didn't experience more. You haven't hit that scenario yet in life. That's where the issue is kind of coming from.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So to wrap it up, we'll say that have them volunteer at different events or things that are going to, like we did the thumbs up with the cancer, that opened their eyes. When you're traveling, have them go outside of the normal resort lifestyle and maybe go into the community and see like what it's really like for the people who are in the community. If you can, maybe bring some things to let them donate to somewhere in that community, or find, like I found one of the housekeepers and I was like, hey, does your kids need X, Y, and Z? And she was like, yes, we'll take it. We loved, thank you so much for doing that. Having them go into, just try to get them around other people maybe who don't look like them as well. I would say for me, growing up, that was my biggest thing that set me apart from other people, is I knew how to get in a room and interact with other people who didn't look like me. Because I was around, in high school, I was around people who didn't, and in Long Island, I was around people who didn't look like me. Where somebody else might be kind of like standoffish or feel like everybody's out to get them kind of thing.
The other thing that I would say is, sorry, about to cut you off on that one, is like, let them in on, like, as parents, let them in on things that you went through. Like again, I know we always try to be superheroes, like my dad's a superhero, this and that, but you also have to show to some extent your vulnerabilities. I messed that up, but you need to show that as well. Like, literally let them in, like things that when you were younger at this age, like what you struggled with, where it could have been. It could have been self-esteem. It could have been, bullying. Like, literally let them in to let them know that, hey, it's not just you.
Yeah.
And or experiences that you had with people who are different than you. If you walked into a room and people acknowledge you, how you handle it and how you overcame it. Because I think sometimes, like, we try to just hide as much as possible, just try to have everything look perfect and polished. And they're trying to live up to that. I got to be perfect and polished
and
too.
when
And
they
like,
realize oh, because it's a hard, once you do it one time and you see the look on their face like, wait, you did that?
No,
you didn't turn in your homework.
It's a different world.
You had gotten a fight.
Yep.
What?
It's
it blows. But then it kind of makes them, I think they appreciate you a little bit more because they realize I can mess up and it's okay to mess up. My parents are gonna love me regardless if I mess up. But look at them now. They messed up, but that wasn't their whole life, because sometimes we harp on them about the little things they mess up on, and then they think, oh, I can't be perfect. I'm not perfect anymore. So like you said, just letting them see we're human. We went through things, we went through experiences. This is how we handle this experience, because the experience we went through, they probably will never go through. Not until maybe they're 20 something years old.
Exactly. And the final thing, I know you said final before, I would say, like, for people who have immigrant parents, and that was me, whereas you feel so pressured to do so much because we came to this country for you. You have to do this. You have to do that. Like, and I get it, because listen, I heard my grandmother talk about all the struggles that she went through, like growing up in Trinidad, and what she left behind, and, to make a better life for us. And there is going to be a lot of pressure on the first generation. Luckily, I'm not the first. My brothers, they were older than me, so they got a lot more than I did. But I do see that pressure. So by you being in that bubble, or you putting in them that bubble, I'm talking to immigrant parents, by you putting in that bubble, just realize that they're under pressure too, but you also have to let them in on, again, what we just talked about from before, those struggles that you have or you had when you first got here. So they don't automatically feel that they have to be perfect. Like if they drop something the wrong way, then like your world is over, life is over. So it, just kind of just be mindful of that too. We see it from both sides. I saw it from both sides, but just realizing like, hey, my parents did make a little bit of mistakes too.
And I see it from the educator side too, all the time.
Oh yeah, I can only imagine.
The pressure, and we did this to Chase too, and we didn't realize we were doing it to Chase, that he had to have all A's and he had to be perfect with his grades because I'm a teacher and I'm like, that's a reflection on me. And then when it was like, you know what? This is hard.
Yeah.
It's hard. School is hard. It's okay if you get a B. Now, we're not accepting those C's and D's, no, but it's okay if you don't, if you fail, but you tried your hardest, it's okay. We got to, all right, now what do we learn from this? How can we do better next time? Yeah. So just take that pressure off a little bit, show them some life experiences, take them outside of that bubble that they're in and put them in other situations, even if it's like sports or basketball or something where they can see other people who don't always look like them. Go to different churches and try to make yourself as comfortable as you can. Just try something different than what you're doing now, because that bubble is real. Yeah. And if you don't pop it, I think it's going to hurt them in the long run.
It hurts big time. It hurts
real. When they hit reality and they see that life is not all peaches and cream, and life is not going to be always just going to give me what I want, and they get into real world, it's like, wait,
this
what?
Is real. Like,
this is real. No one's ever talked to me like this.
Yeah.
No one's ever told me no. And no one's ever.
That's where it's
pop
coming
it.
From. Pop it.
Pop it
early.
Pop it real good. So.
All right, guys. So I appreciate you guys checking in. So,
leave in the comments if you're going through things, and also leave in the comments, what are some things that you've done to pop that bubble? What have you done with your kids that made life a little bit easier? Because we can all learn from each other.
Yeah.
That's one thing. We can always learn from each other. And there's someone in the comments. We're going to read those comments and see, like, what else can we do as parents to help them just be better, you know?
Better humans.
Better humans. Yeah.
So make sure you like, you subscribe, and you click that notification bell so you could be notified for episodes that we drop on this content or travel content or what else the boys has us doing, out there. So thank you again for checking in. Till next time.